someone says like the third step, the as if part, how do you create an example that isn't connecting to what is happening? I find trouble creating a scenario that isn't close to home or connected to the situation. Yeah, well, you want it close to home, but you don't want it to be, again, like I said, if I'm doing a scene where I'm like arguing with my wife, trying to get her to let me go on a vacation with the boys, if that's the scene, the actual scene, I don't want to imagine I'm talking to my wife trying to go on a vacation with the boys, because what it does is it reminds us that we're false. So how do you pick something that works? You're looking for something that matches the stake level, but is not an exact replication. And what I often say to people in class is it's just a new muscle you're working. And the more you do it, the better you get at it. And the more you start doing it, you can be surprised at how your unconscious knows, how your gut knows. And it can often be things that come out of left field. So really, it's like all new muscles. You just want to practice coming up with things. And, you know, when people are in class and they see me helping other people or watching other people come up with it, and then, you know, taking real time to practice coming up with it, the muscle grows, right? And you start trusting the unconscious more. An example I often give is that in class one time, this young man was doing this scene from a film where he was a young man. It was this like road comedy. And basically he was supposed to, in the scene he was auditioning with, was he goes into this gas station and he's talking to the young girl who's in her early 20s like he is, who's, you know, across the counter, he's buying Doritos or whatever and getting gas. And he ends up asking her to quit her job and go on this road trip with him. And she does in the film. And he kept picking as ifs that were about like trying to pick up women. And of course they weren't working because they made him self-conscious, and they just seemed like just too much. And it was like slimy. And finally the as if he found was, the action was to get someone to go on a big adventure. And the as if was like he was talking to his grandmother to try to get her to go to Disneyland with him. And so he was doing the as if, and I'll just, you know, do as an example, but he was like, look, Grandma, let's face it, like how much time do we have here really to do things like this? And it would mean so much to me, so much, if we could go to Disneyland for the day. I would love to do that. This may sound crazy, but I think you should quit your job right now at this convenience store and hop over the counter and go with me on a road trip across the country to see my uncle. I think we would have fun if we did that together. And I think you should come with. So he did that, and the scene just like worked. And the women in the class were like, oh, he's so cute. And, you know, because we're looking it's this weird process that it's experiential and it's hard to talk about, even though I've been doing this for years and teaching people for years. But part of it is like the almost, what's the word I'm looking for? I always use this word, but I can never think of it. It's like a dichotomy, or it's just like, again, the resistance, or it's like, because we're finding this fun thing that is kind of taking us off what the scene's about, it just opens us up in a certain way. And it's, again, to watch, like I had a woman in class do this scene just the other night. And it was sort of a seduction scene in a way, or the character breakdown was like she needed to be sexy and charming, and her as if was get someone to take a big risk, but it was one of her best friends, even though the scene was about an attractive guy. And she was, even though it was her best friend in the as if, when she did the scene, there was so much charm and charisma, and it was sexy, and it was just all happening, and it works beautifully. So it's often things that seem contrary are often the best fit. Okay, so here's a cool question. How do you maintain spontaneous truth when your agent, the casting director, has specified you must be word perfect to the provided size? So if someone is like, you have to be word perfect, well, we'll see. You know, it's like, yeah, if I remember the lines, I'm word perfect. And if I forget the lines, then I'm going to look down or make something up. But you have to be. Okay, but I can't. You have to cry on that line. Okay, but I can't. I can't control feelings. So I'm going to pick high stakes, and I'm going to like, meaning if they're like, you need to be word perfect, great. I can aim and I can spend extra time memorizing, but I still, and I've had these auditions before where it's like the lawyer, and I know they want to see somebody be able to memorize these lines and say them quickly. And I've worked on it a certain way and trying to get it word perfect. And sometimes I can, and sometimes I can't, because I ain't perfect. And if they're like going to go like, oh, he didn't get a word perfect, we're not going to cast him. Okay, c'est la vie, man. I can't control my mind. I may lose a line. I just want to like go for it. And if I find myself having to look at the script, so be it. If I make something up, so be it. But I can't stress enough. You can't play the action and try to get the lines right. You can spend time memorizing it rote and just drilling it and drilling it. And then you got to let it go and jump. And I think 9 times out of 10, when they say they want it word perfect, if you're doing something really active and your personality happens to be a fit for that role, which it's usually not, so you're usually not going to book it. But if you're doing something really active and spontaneous and your personality and look happen to be a fit, you flub a line, they don't care, even though they said they really did, you know? What are one of your biggest tips for memorization and prepping for an audition? So one of my biggest tips is to do it rote, and is to keep it as a separate part of the process. Just to spend like 30 minutes, like this is the way I memorize lines. Like if this is my lines are, attach yourself to what is spiritually superior, regardless of what other people think or do. Hold to your true aspiration, no matter what is going on around you. I find it helpful to memorize it without any inflection, without line readings. And I do something like I'll cover it up and I'll just go for the first part, like attach yourself to what is spiritually superior. 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 Attach yourself to what is spiritually superior, regardless of what other people think or do. Attach yourself to what is spiritually superior, regardless of what other people think or do. And I won't move on and try to memorize a new part until I've said it like that whole section correct, like 3 times in a row. And I just do that and do that and do that. And I make it clear as part of my process when I am just memorizing and there's no acting involved, and when I'm doing my acting, and when I'm going to try to be off book with it and just let it rip. But I never try to, I aim to, of course I do because I'm imperfect, but I aim to never play the action and try to get the lines right. And a big trap that actors are making in memorizing is to go like, attach yourself to what is spiritually superior. Attach yourself to what is spiritually superior. Attach yourself to what is spiritually superior. It's easier to memorize it that way, but then when I try to play the action, I find myself going, attach yourself to what is spiritually superior. Why the fuck am I saying and talking it this way when I want to be playing the action? Because a lot of actors, without realizing it, have memorized certain ways of saying the lines and certain, just line readings. So memorizing it rote without any inflection, without any line readings, very helpful to do it when exercising. Very helpful to do it on a treadmill. Or I will put some lines on an index card and jog around my neighborhood a little bit and do it while exercising. I find that very helpful. Okay. Forgive me, I may eat a little something while I continue to ask questions because I need to. My wife just texted me how it's going. I think very well. You say you like when the bad voices are louder sometimes, but not to get into discussions with your old beliefs. Can you explain? You're not trying to ignore them, but don't talk to them? Yes. So if I am like, if I'm like obsessing about doing this webinar, which I was right, last night or even right before, if I need to take like instead of trying to talk to it, I get it on paper. And it's like, I have fear this webinar won't go well. If it doesn't go well, my whole life is doomed and everything's going to fall apart. No, the reality is that, my new empowering truth is as long as I just show up with my principles imperfectly, I am going to be led and I'm going to have a beautiful life no matter what happens. Great. And now what's a next right action I can take? Meaning instead of getting in conversation with the old beliefs, we want to do something else, which why I find it so helpful to have a written technique. We have steps like the pilot who flies the plane. It's a very adrenaline thing to be a pilot, I imagine, and a lot of old beliefs to come up. So a pilot who's been flying for 20 years still looks at the checklist because it gives him just something to do instead of try to calm himself or try to talk to the old beliefs. So if your approach to the audition is such that you understand what the steps are, like this is how long I work on memorizing, and this is when I work on my improv and as if, and this is when I do this, and this is what I understand is going to happen in the audition, you have something to do. So you can do it instead of getting a dialogue with the old beliefs. My old beliefs or the feelings and thoughts around them are present for a lot of this webinar, but I just keep focusing on what I'm doing. When I'm practicing for a scene, should I have my reader, AKA husband, right? Tell me scene, improv, or do I switch back and forth on my own? Oh, great question. And if I do, how do I know when to switch between improv and the scene? Great question. So what I would say is, like, if you're with your husband and you want to do this improv thing, just, you can do either one. But what I often do is that, like, I say, like, to the person that I'm reading with, um, I'll say, like, I'm going to do this improv, and then at a certain point, I'm going to pause for a beat. And after I pause, I'm going to say the first line, or if the reader has the first line, I'm just going to do the improv. And after a little bit, I'm just going to pause and nod, and they come at me. Because you want to create that pause so you can easily edit it out. You want to watch, even if you're the first line, a trap can be like, Scott, you're doing drugs. This is insane. You can't to be or not to be that, because now it's harder to edit it. So you want to do that pause. But you can also play with, like, having the person say to you, if you don't want to have to worry about when you're going to do it, you can try both. So your husband at a certain point can go scene, and then you just take a pause and then go into the scene. So you can try both. And again, this is something that I stress when I work with actors. Even things that I say that I'm like, this really works and this is great, you got to try it. You got to test it out and discover if it works for you. And that's why having a notebook and keeping an audition journal, and practically, like in a nuts and bolts way, like the way you learn how you work on a car or how you do dance, like what works for me. And I need to discover what works for me so I can do it. So we want to really mix up how we're approaching auditions. And the people in class, I'm like, by all means, use these tools that I'm giving you if they seem to work. But if you've got other stuff that's working, then use those as well. You just want to test them and discover what works for you. Yeah. So I think that's all the questions that I have. I don't see any more popping up. Thank you guys so much for participating in this. Have a great rest of your weekend, and please be safe and sane and kind to each other. And I hope I get to connect with you again in the future. Okay. God bless.